Greetings, Dinner with a Doctor and Creation Health friends. This is Dr. Michael Hollie. As you know, we've had to postpone our Dinner with a Doctor events due to the current ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. So, I thought it'd be a good opportunity to review some very important health principles as we are all trying to deal with this whole situation. The situation, unfortunately, is creating stress for a lot of people and challenging us in ways that we never thought we would be challenged before. So I'm going to review with you today some ways to prevent some illnesses and make our bodies more resistant to illness. COVID-19 is an ongoing pandemic, and today in this presentation, I'm not going to necessarily cover specifics of the COVID-19 because you're getting lots of that in the media, so you don't need to hear that from me. But rather, what we're going to cover is how to stay healthy, what works, what may not work, and what you should be doing to keep you and your family healthy during these trying times. COVID-19, as the CDC has told us, typically presents with fever, cough, and shortness of breath, often in that particular order. So will a mask protect us? Well, for healthcare workers, they're encouraged to use an N95 respirator mask. However, for those that are ill, a simple surgical mask will help patients that are infected from spreading the virus to others. Should we be wearing masks in general? No, the CDC tells us that it's mainly for healthcare workers and for those that are infected. Quarantine. The interesting thing about this slide is I made it about 8 years ago when I was talking about influenza virus and those sorts of things. And now here we are today in 2020 and we're quarantining. And that's confining potentially infected persons to their homes or community-based facilities to stop the spread of that disease. Now quarantine could apply to an entire geographic area, and we're starting to see that in various countries around the world. Social distancing, you've heard plenty about that. That's just remaining out of congregate settings, avoiding mass gatherings, and maintaining a distance of 6 feet or more between our fellow man. It means staying home, working from home, canceling events like church services and school, and a lot of that's going on now. And we may see even more social distancing and sort of harboring at home soon. If you are sick, we strongly encourage you to stay home so you do not spread illness to other people. Vaccination, as you've already found out, we don't have a vaccination available for coronavirus. Same thing with influenza virus. When a new strain pandemic comes about, it usually takes a year to a year and a half to develop, so vaccine is not the answer right now. Even if we had a vaccine, the supply would often be limited because it's a new vaccine. So we need to be looking in other directions. With the flu, sometimes we use antivirals like Tamiflu. However, right now we have nothing for COVID-19 that is approved. What we do know is that they're looking at drugs like chloroquine and hydroxychloroquine, which have been used for years to treat malaria and arthritis. There are a couple of other antivirals that have been looked at. However, it's important to note that all of this at this point is anecdotal. There are no controlled studies, and so therefore it's not being used routinely. So we need to rely again on other things. Vaccine and drug treatment just not available right now. So what can we do to stay well? Well, we know that when we sneeze and cough, we spread lots of respiratory germs, and we know that COVID-19 spread goes from person to person via close contact and respiratory droplets. It also can be spread by touching a contaminated surface. Coughing and sneezing. Did you know that a sneeze travels out of your mouth at over 100 miles an hour? Yes, each sneeze can throw over 100,000 microbes into the air. And a cough can travel even faster, up to 300 miles per hour. So staying away from people who are coughing and sneezing, really, really important, because once they cough and sneeze, you can't move quick enough to get out of their path. Yes, coughing into our arms and elbows and things will help some, but it's best to avoid whenever possible. We've gone from handshakes to fist bumps to elbow rubs to foot bumps. And here's what I'm recommending: the distant smile and wave, a greeting that is still very nice, but you don't have to touch each other. So if you could see the germs on your hands, you'd be washing them a lot more often. But unfortunately, we can't. This slide was made before the coronavirus pandemic, so the numbers might be a little bit different, but we know in general that 80% of germs for respiratory infections are transmitted by our hands. And this is alarming. 30% of people do not wash their hands when leaving a restroom. Now, I hope with the current coronavirus pandemic that number has increased, but we don't know for sure, do we? Many people who sneeze and cough into their hands don't wash their hands immediately after sneezing into them, and then, as we mentioned, they transmit it to other people. So 80% of the people who do wash their hands don't use soap or wash long enough to get rid of germs. Now, the CDC has given us some guidelines when washing our hands. They say to do it properly, we need to be washing for at least 20 seconds. And they tell us don't touch our face, our eyes, and our nose. You know, this is something we should be doing all the time, not just during a coronavirus pandemic. We should always be washing our hands and keeping them away from our face and eyes and nose. Our eyes can transmit respiratory viruses. Many people say, well, how does that happen? Well, it's through the lacrimal duct. That's the tear duct. That's why when we cry, our nose starts running. Well, if you put some viruses into the eye, they can track right down through that tear duct into your nose and cause a respiratory virus. So keep your hands away from your face and your nose. You know, if germs, we could see them and it would show up on our face, we'd be appalled to see how many times we touch our face and our nose and places like that. So when you wash your hands, keep them away from your face. And if you haven't washed your hands, really keep them away from your face. The CDC said to avoid catching the coronavirus, don't touch your face. So this gentleman decided to get a dog Elizabethan collar to help him keep his hands away from his face. I don't necessarily recommend that, but it's a novel approach. So where do we miss when we wash? Well, the dark red, which shows the fingertips and our thumbs, are where we often miss. So we need to be very careful when we're washing to especially get those areas that are commonly missed, like fingertips and our thumb and really the backs of our hands as well. We hear a lot about hand sanitizers right now. Well, don't count on them to be 100% protective from anything. Do wash your hands. That's our first option. And when you can't wash your hands, use the hand sanitizers and then wash your hands as quickly as you can. Even the CDC agrees that they get rid of a lot of germs. They're recommending 60 to 70% alcohol for the hand sanitizers. So what do we do typically when we get the flu or some sort of respiratory infection? Because coronavirus is a respiratory infection. It seems to be much more virulent, much more contagious, and much more serious. But what do we typically do? Well, most people go to their doctor and they want an antibiotic, but we know that cold viruses are caused by viruses, as the name implies, and coronavirus, as the name implies, is a virus also. So antibiotics are not going to help. They're not going to help us get any better any quicker. They may actually prolong the illness. Adverse reactions are very common with antibiotics, and antibiotic-resistant strains can occur as well. Why else shouldn't we give it? Well, it kills the good bacteria in our gut. We don't want to do that because that's an important part of our immune system. Antibiotics can also cause diarrhea, digestive disturbances, yeast infections, kidney damage, and yes, allergic reactions as well. So antibiotics are not the answer to most respiratory infections and certainly not the answer to COVID-19. When should we use them? Well, if you have strep throat or strep pharyngitis, bacterial infections that have been proven, urinary tract infections, bacterial pneumonias, some ear infections, some skin infections, and certainly severe prolonged sinus infections. But most respiratory infections do not need antibiotics. Cough medicines. People are often calling my office wanting something for cough. And generally cough medications aren't very effective. Studies show that honey works just as well as many of the over-the-counter cough medications. Sometimes people want hydrocodone, which as you know is a narcotic. It's only mildly effective and it has a lot of potential side effects. So I do not prescribe this for cough. Cough is there for a purpose. It's to help our bodies upwardly mobilize our mucus, our dead cells, and the viruses that are infecting us. So we want cough to work for us. We don't want to suppress it. Antihistamines, a lot of people think if they take an antihistamine, it's going to make their cold better. But really, an analysis of 35 studies of antihistamines for colds and other viral illnesses showed no evidence for significant improvement, and they do not enable a faster recovery. Ibuprofen, things like Advil and Motrin, they may relieve a small amount of discomfort from fever, but they do not enhance our recovery. And actually, reducing the fever may actually prolong our illnesses. Fever increases the ability of our white cells to mop up and kill the viruses and the virus-infected cells. So fever reducers actually prolong viral shedding. And an important note with COVID-19, they're recommending ibuprofen not be used, and some are even suggesting that we shouldn't be using it right now when we're out and about and being exposed to various things. So think twice before you take ibuprofen, and certainly if you think you have COVID-19, definitely avoid ibuprofen. Acetaminophen or Tylenol, it's actually more toxic than ibuprofen, but right now, given the current pandemic, it may be the better choice. But again, remember that fever is helping your body fight infection, so we don't want to necessarily suppress the fever. When you get dehydrated, taking acetaminophen can actually increase your risk for liver toxicity. And the American Academy of Pediatrics do not recommend routinely treating children with fever-reducing drugs. So remember, fever is there for a purpose, and it's actually helping your body fight off the infection. What about vitamin C? Lots of people like to take vitamin C, right? Yeah, well, actually a review of 30 studies concluded that preventive use of vitamin C supplementation was not effective in reducing the incidence of upper respiratory tract infections in most adults. It may help those with inadequate nutrition and under significant stress, which many of us are right now. And there are some protocols for very high-dose vitamin C when a person's sick, but I haven't seen a lot of strong evidence to recommend that routinely. So get your vitamin C from your vegetables and your fruits and places like that, because you get a lot of other things along with the vitamin C. What about zinc? Well, zinc is an essential mineral. It plays an important role in our immune system. Many people actually are a little borderline deficient in zinc, so you may want to consider taking a zinc supplement. 15 milligrams a day is the recommended daily intake. And deficiency leads to immune dysfunction and susceptibility to infection. So you may want to consider zinc supplements. However, I would suggest that you get zinc through your food. Pumpkin seeds, sesame seeds, cashews, pine nuts, beans, shiitake mushrooms, all rich in zinc and will give you likely all the zinc that you need. I put elderberry extract in this presentation because a lot of people like to take it when they get sick. So why is that? Well, there's a flavonoid in elderberries called anthocyanins. Now, anthocyanins are also found in other berries, eggplant skins, currant and grape skins, as well as cherries and black rice. What do these anthocyanins do? Well, they increase our monocyte, which is a type of white blood cell function, against viral infected cells. Also, they inhibit the adhesion of the virus to cell receptors. So they do a lot of good things to help fight viruses. Studies suggest that black elderberry extract can inhibit the growth of influenza virus, shorten the duration of influenza symptoms, and enhance antibody levels against the virus. Will this work against coronavirus? We don't know, but we know that it works against other viruses. One caution I do have, the elderberry extract is a bit bitter, so often the syrups and things that you buy in the store are going to have a lot of sugar in them to try to hide that bitter flavor, so they'll put glucose and sugar and different things in there. So I would encourage you to get an unsweetened version. And again, this is mainly when you're trying to fight off a respiratory infection. On the other hand, echinacea, numerous trials in adults and children show it not to be effective in lessening cold symptoms or shortening the length of the illness. So this is one that I would suggest you save your money, and it's probably not going to help you. Here's one that I just discovered recently. It's been around for a long, long time, but I wasn't aware of its ability to help with influenza. It's called NAC, or N-acetylcysteine. Now, it's a precursor to glutathione, and you say, what's glutathione? Well, glutathione is a very powerful antioxidant, so it's very helpful in your body. NAC has been used as a mucolytic drug to help break up mucus. It's been used as an antioxidant, and it works to enhance our lung defense mechanisms. There have been numerous studies indicating that preventive treatment with NAC reduces the incidence of exacerbations in chronic bronchitis, a disease of our lungs. But here's the study that caught my eye. It's an old study. It's from 1997, but it's a well-designed study with interesting results. They did a randomized double-blind placebo control. That means the investigators didn't know what the patients were getting, and the patient didn't know what they were getting. They used 262 patients. Well, majority of them, 78%, were over 65. They did a placebo versus the active drug, 600 milligrams of NAC twice a day for 6 months, and they gave it during the fall and winter flu season. And they found it to be well tolerated. In fact, the side effect profile was very similar to the placebo. I will mention one caution: if a person's taking nitroglycerin and they take NAC at the same time, it may cause a severe headache, so be aware of that. That's, of course, the minority of people, but I do want you to be aware. So what happened in this study? Well, the treatment group, those getting NAC, they had significantly less influenza episodes, significantly less symptoms, local and systemic, and their length of time confined to bed was also reduced. 25% of the virus-infected subjects receiving NAC developed symptomatic form. In other words, only 1 in 4 receiving NAC developed the influenza virus, whereas almost 80% in the placebo group developed influenza. So 1 in 4 versus about 80%. So it seems to be quite effective, at least for influenza. Will it work for other respiratory viruses? I don't know, but it seems to be relatively harmless, and it may be something that you might want to consider. The other important note was that there was similar antibody formation in both groups. So even though they were taking NAC and had less symptoms, they still formed some protective antibodies. So something you may want to consider. It's one study, so I can't just 100% give it my backing. But quite honestly, right now, when we're looking for ways to resist, this may be something for you to consider. It's important to know that a healthy body is highly resistant to viral attack. That's the way our body's made. Our bodies are not made to be sick. Our bodies are made to resist viruses and bacteria. And when we put our bodies in the best situation, it's going to do the best job of resisting. So micronutrient deficiencies contribute to the mortality and the morbidity of infectious diseases. So when I explain the immune system to my patients, I tell them it's sort of like having an army. Do you have enough army men to fight the battle? And more importantly, how do they work? Do they know how to fight? So is your immune system adequate in numbers? And is your immune system adequate in function? And just like the military has many different branches fighting the battle on many different levels and from different angles, the immune system is very, very complex with many different cells and tissues and chemical mediators that communicate between the cells. It's an incredibly complex system. And that's why just one supplement here and there, it's not really going to help your immune system that much. You need to take the full approach, which is what we're going to talk about next. I do want to mention one component of the immune system called natural killer cells, also called NK cells. These are your rapid response cells. They respond quickly to virally infected cells, and they're part of our first line of defense against cancer cells and virus-infected cells. So many of the components I'm going to mention going forward are going to talk about how it affects our natural killer cells, a really important part of your immune system. So, an ounce of prevention. Often we chase symptoms. I prefer to prevent symptoms whenever we can. What we're going to talk about now are ways to help prevent, make your body stronger, and also how to help you fight it off if you do get exposed to coronavirus or some other respiratory virus. So why do we get sick? Well, there's lots of reasons, anywhere from stress to body imbalances toxins that we get from our air and our food and water. Maybe it's not drinking enough water, maybe it's drinking contaminated water, but nonetheless, toxins all affect our immune system. So we're going to talk about what I'm going to choose to call the 8 natural doctors. That is nutrition, exercise, water, sunlight, temperance, air, rest, and trust in divine power. Let's start with my favorite, nutrition. Proper nutrition is critical all the time to help us prevent various chronic diseases. But right now, during this COVID-19 pandemic, we want our bodies to be as strong as possible so that we can resist illnesses when we're exposed to them. So the nutritional status of the host is critical in permitting or preventing viral or bacterial infections, and nutritional inadequacies in the host allow the modifications of viruses into more virulent, which means stronger, or dangerous forms. So when we're inadequately taking in the right foods, our body doesn't work very well, and the viruses that do infect us take on more significant and dangerous forms. When diets are low in the consumption of green and yellow vegetables and fruits, these viral illnesses take on a very serious form, and multiple micronutrients are helpful in keeping our immune system working well. Here's one you may not be aware of, fat and immunity. This is interesting. A normal fat diet, that is normal for the American diet right now, is around 30%. That reduces our natural killer cell activity by 50%. And if you have a high-fat diet, which is closer to the standard American diet of around 35% fat, it drops your natural killer cell activity by 79%. I don't want to go into the battle with only about 20% of my army. I want the full army. Now, if you do a low-fat diet, there was no reduction in natural killer cell activity. What's a low-fat diet? Around 15% of your calories from fat would be considered a low, and quite honestly, that would be the most healthy for you. You don't need high fat in your diet. Sugar and immunity, this is an old study, but it was interesting. They looked at the number of bacteria eaten or consumed by white blood cells in people who had consumed 0 teaspoons of sugar, and you can see that their white cells consumed 14 bacteria. Those that had had 12 teaspoons, their white cells only consumed about 5.5, and those that had 24 teaspoons, they didn't work very well at all. And it doesn't take much. 12 teaspoons is about what's in one sweetened soda beverage. So it doesn't take much to get 12 teaspoons of sugar, particularly with all the processed food that's out there. Plant-based diets compared with omnivores, those are people who eat both meat and plants. The vegans had significantly higher blood levels of vitamins A, C, and E. And here's an interesting point. Their natural killer cell activity was twice that of the omnivores. Resveratrol, it's found in the skin of red grapes and in berries and in peanuts, strongly inhibits the replication of influenza virus within the cells, suppresses inflammation, broad antiviral effects, and multiple anti-cancer effects. So we need to be thinking about putting some red grapes and berries and things into our diet to get our resveratrol. Turmeric. You're familiar with turmeric. It's used widely in India for treatment of inflammation. It inhibits several cytokines responsible for lung damage during viral pneumonias. And we know that the COVID-19 really attacks the lungs. So, no studies to show anything here as far as against COVID-19, but may want to consider including some turmeric, either supplement or in your food as seasoning. Excellent anti-inflammatory substance. Caloric restriction. This study showed that 60% dietary restriction increases natural killer cell numbers 4-fold and their activity 2-fold. So cutting back on calories when we're sick can make our immune system stronger. So you may want to consider cutting back your calories a bit as far as eating simple, lots of liquids, lots of fruits and vegetables, things that your body can process very nicely and reap all the benefits from the phytochemicals in those foods. So don't glutton. Don't be a glutton when you're sick. It's not going to help your immune system any. Cruciferous vegetables, one of my favorite vegetables because they are so powerful and full of lots of great phytochemicals. They contain micronutrients and phytochemicals that are very helpful in revving up your immune system. They have a unique sulfur-containing compound that are responsible for that kind of bitter or pungent flavor in the cruciferous, but that bitter or pungent flavor is actually good for you. So just to remind you, cruciferous vegetables, here are some examples: arugula, bok choy, beet greens, broccoli, and collard greens, as well as Brussels sprouts, cauliflower, kale, Swiss chard, and cabbage. All excellent foods that you should have in your diet every day. So they contain these sulfur compounds that are powerful immune boosting effects and anti-cancer activity as well. Isothiocyanates are created from different compounds that are in cruciferous vegetables. They're created through an enzyme called myrosinase, and there are over 120 of these isothiocyanates that have been identified, and likely more to come. So they work in different locations on the cell, different molecules, and working all together, they help remove carcinogens and kill off cancer cells. And to get your maximum benefit from these cruciferous vegetables, you need to chop them, chew them, blend them. The best way is to chop up these vegetables, let them sit for about 30 to 40 minutes, and then cook them, steam them, however you want. That allows this myrosinase enzyme to create the isothiocyanate, and then the isothiocyanate is heat resistant. So therefore you create this, then you can cook it and it won't be destroyed. So chop, chew, blend, whatever you can do to get optimum isothiocyanates from your cruciferous vegetables. The allium family, another great immune boosting food with onions and garlics and leeks and shallots and chives and scallions. They have great antioxidant, anti-cancer, anti-inflammatory. They also have organosulfur compounds like the cruciferous. Theirs are a little different but similar. And they work to improve our immune function and prevent disease. You notice that I'm not isolating out any particular component from these food groups, but the entire food is full of lots of good phytochemicals, phyto meaning plant chemicals to help our immune system. So you need the whole food. So eating onions, quercetin is a chemical in onions that helps protect against oxidative stress and lung epithelial damage caused by influenza. Also found in apples and green leafy vegetables and beans. Garlic. In one study, garlic reduced seasonal viral respiratory tract infections by 63%. So you see, garlic and onions may give you bad breath, but they're going to boost your immune system and might help you with a little social distancing. People aren't going to get within 6 feet of you. So eat more garlic and eat more onions. Fresh fruit. Fruit is high in antioxidants, lots of good vitamin C, flavonoids, limonoids, fiber, pectin, phytochemicals. All of these help neutralize carcinogens and boost your immune system. The quote says, "The food you eat can either be the safest and most powerful form of medicine or the slowest form of poison." Good food for thought there. Color. You've heard me say before, the more colorful your fruits and vegetables, the healthier they are. Lots more antioxidants when they have a lot of color, so the more colorful food you eat, the better. Lutein is one of those components found in cruciferous vegetables. It's a xanthophyll found in green leafies, particularly spinach and kale. It's a great antioxidant. And so people often ask, can I just get my nutrients from supplements? Well, you can, but not really, because it's not going to be the same. A Centrum vitamin has 250 micrograms of lutein, whereas one leaf of collard greens has 10,000 micrograms, not to mention all the other nutrients you're getting from the collard greens. So don't get your nutrition from supplements, get it from the plants. Nuts, seeds, and avocados, full of antioxidants, phytosterols, vitamin E, and selenium. All good foods that we should be including as part of a balanced plant-based diet. Mushrooms, often overlooked, but they boost the immune system by, look at this, 250% increase in your natural killer cells. It's a good source of trace minerals, B vitamins, zinc, and D, and we do recommend that you eat them cooked takes out a little toxin that may be found in mushrooms. So some cooked mushrooms be an excellent addition to your healthy diet. And be careful where you get your mushrooms. It says, okay, those weren't ordinary mushrooms, so just get the ones they sell in the store. This is a quote from a book that I really like. It's called Ministry of Healing. And I'll tell you before I read it that this was written over 100 years ago. And I believe the author, Ellen White, was spot on when she said, through wrong habits of eating, the appetite has become perverted. Often it demands food that impairs health and causes weakness instead of strength. We cannot safely be guided by the customs of society. The disease and suffering that everywhere prevail are largely due to popular errors in regard to diet. And we see that with many chronic diseases. And right now, during this pandemic, we can't afford to put our body in a situation where we're more susceptible to infection. So we need to be careful with our diet and some of the other items that we're going to talk about right now. So the standard American diet is full of processed foods and sugary foods, foods that are full of oil and salt and processed flour. It's not a good diet, and it's leading our American public and really worldwide public into many chronic diseases. Instead, we should be looking at the GLAD diet, which is God's life-activating diet, which is full of plants and grains and seeds and nuts and things that will make our bodies stronger, not weaker. You've heard me say it before at dinner with a doctor. The Bible diet comes from Genesis. Then God said, I give you every seed-bearing plant on the face of the whole earth and every tree that has fruit with seed in it. They will be yours for food, and you will eat the plants of the field. So let's move on to other aspects of making our bodies healthy and more resistant to fight off illnesses. Exercise. Physical activity helps us to battle stress, anxiety, and depression. It enables us to sleep better, look better, and feel better. Did you know that nearly 250,000 deaths per year in the United States are attributed to a lack of physical activity? This includes heart disease, diabetes, depression, and yes, our immune function as well. In one study, moderate exercise was associated with a significant reduction in the risk of upper respiratory tract infections. So during times like this, we know we're quarantined in our homes, but we can get out in the fresh air, not amongst a lot of people, and get some exercise, get fresh air, exercise, and some sunshine as well. So I encourage you to go take a walk sometime and just keep your social distance, because we need to be very aware of spreading illness and exposing ourselves to illness. Water, often overlooked. Consequences of dehydration, not getting enough water, include constipation, urinary tract and respiratory infections, delirium, renal failure, electrolyte imbalance, hyperthermia, and longer time to wound healing. How much water? Well, it's going to vary from person to person, but somewhere around 6 to 8 ounce glasses per day. More for some, maybe less for children, but you should be peeing to where your urine is clear. If your urine is cloudy, then you're not getting enough water. If you've got a cough, you may want to sip on some hot water or some hot caffeine-free tea. Neutral water, just water for regular drinking, is better absorbed than really cold water. And here's something you may not be aware of. If you're coming down with something, and actually I would say even as prevention, hot and cold treatments for your whole body can be helpful. There's different protocols for this. One is to get in the hot shower, get it, as hot as you can get without, you don't want to burn yourself or anything like that, of course, but stay in there in the hot shower for a minute, then cold for a minute, and then back and forth, maybe 2 or 3 more times to where you've had hot, cold, hot, cold, hot, cold, end on cold, and then go to bed for a half hour. What that does is through vasoconstriction and vasodilation, stimulates the immune system, mobilizes a lot of your white cells, and helps you to fight off things. But again, I would use it also as preventive, not just when you're sick. If you're coming down with a GI bug, we do know that charcoal binds viruses. Drink 2 tablespoons of activated charcoal powder in 1 8-ounce glass of water, and this can help reduce GI problems with viruses. Sunlight, super important, not always available to us, but we call vitamin D the sunshine vitamin. Declining sunshine in the winter may be a factor of why we see more respiratory infections during that time. There was a study in 2006 looking at children given vitamin D. Those children had a reduced incidence of viral respiratory infections. Other studies show increased risk for viral respiratory infections in people with low vitamin D levels. So if you haven't had your doctor check your vitamin D level, that's something you might want to do. If you can't get in to see your doctor right now during the COVID-19, which probably you're not going to want to go in if you're otherwise well, you can still take 1,000 to 2,500 international units of vitamin D and probably get some benefit that way. Sunlight, exposure to natural sunlight, 1 hour a day for 12 days, significantly increased circulating immune cells for up to 2 weeks. So whenever possible, get out, absorb some sunshine. Don't get burned, use appropriate protection, but do expose your skin 20 to 30 minutes and you will have increased immune function from that. The sun is a powerful promoter of health and well-being. It increases serotonin, which is our feel-good hormone. It reduces serotonin there is reduced serotonin in ADHD, irritability, depression, chronic fatigue, and nausea. So sunlight can help stave off some of that. Unfortunately, Americans on average spend 23 out of every 24 hours in absence of sunlight. We just think about work and school and shopping in stores and all those sorts of things. So we need to make a point to get out and get some sunshine, some fresh air. 20 to 30 minutes of safe sun each day can improve your health, can improve certain skin conditions, make your bones stronger, ward off depression, and likely help you fight off infection through increased vitamin D. Temperance. Goes without saying that smokers are going to be more susceptible to respiratory infections. They also tend to miss more work because of the flu, because the respiratory tract is chronically irritated, so they tend to pick up more infections than the average person. Alcohol, chronic alcohol consumption suppresses natural killer cell activity, so I encourage you to eliminate that from your lifestyle. Pure air. This is something we need right now. We need fresh air. Fresh air negative ions actually activate our natural killer cells. They promote a sense of well-being, decreases anxiety, decreases survival of bacteria and viruses in the air. Now, the best air is going to be found around lakes and forests and rivers, waterfalls, etc. But even the fresh air in your neighborhood is better than what's inside your house. So get outside. Even if you're just going to maybe sit on the porch, maybe it's raining a little bit, just get out on the porch, get some fresh air. If it's not raining, then I encourage you to get the fresh air, the sunshine, and the exercise all at one time. So get outside, take a deep breath, take many deep breaths of good, fresh air. We know that air pollution in the city increases our risk for pneumonia and influenza, so as much as we can stay away from air pollution, that's definitely preferred. Same thing with mold. Mold exposure in water-damaged buildings reduces our natural killer cells, and certainly if your home has a mold problem, it's going to increase your risk for respiratory infections and other symptoms. We know from various studies that the optimal relative humidity for avoiding bacteria, viruses, fungi, dust mites, etc. is somewhere between 40 and 60. I would encourage you to try to keep it around that 50 to 40 range. Start getting up around 60, you're going to start getting dust mite growth and mold growth as well. So if you're not sure in your home, get a humidity gauge, check it out. Try to shoot for around 50% or a little bit less. Fresh air is going to improve our brain and, most importantly during these times, our lung function. Improved learning, lower resting heart rate, and there is that decreased survival of bacteria and virus in the air. And we don't want these things surviving very long in the air that we're around. Rest, another often overlooked part of our immune system and being healthy. We do know that people who sleep well have significantly better immune function than those with insomnia. And look at this, subjects deprived of sleep from 3 a.m. to 7 a.m. experience nearly a 30% drop in immune function. But it gets worse. If you're deprived of sleep from 10 p.m. to 3 a.m., you can experience a nearly 50% drop in immune function. So get sleep, and particularly get those early hours of sleep. This was an interesting study. It looked at sleep habits and susceptibility to the cold virus. And so what they did was they looked at the 23 days prior to this study of their sleep pattern. So people recorded how many hours they slept prior to the onset of this study. And this study specifically, what they did was they sprayed rhinovirus, that's the cold virus, into the nose of these people. And what they found is that those that were getting less than 7 hours of sleep in those preceding 23 days were more susceptible to contracting the cold virus. Those that got 7 or more were much more resistant to the cold virus. So getting adequate sleep, particularly ahead of time, is really important. You know, a lot of times people will get sick and then they say, well, I need to get more rest. That's good too. That'll help you recover. But if you get good rest all the time, it's going to help you be more resistant to various illnesses, particularly respiratory illnesses. So what are some habits that we should have? Well, we should shoot for 7 to 8 hours. We should develop a regular sleep pattern, trying to go to sleep at about the same time every night or as close as possible. Some exercise during the day is going to help us sleep better at night. Reducing or eliminating caffeine and alcohol is going to help us sleep better. Avoiding large meals in the evening, you'll sleep better. And develop a relaxing bedtime routine, something that you and your body and your mind get used to and look forward to each night. You're going to sleep much better if you do that. There's another type of rest we need to think about, and that's spiritual rest. We've been talking about physical rest, now spiritual rest. We can start by making a relationship with God a priority. We can ask God for guidance and wisdom, which gives us a break in a busy day. It reduces our anxiety and worry. And there's a lot of that going on right now around the world, in our United States, in our states, and in our communities. So we need spiritual rest at this time to help relieve some of our anxiety and worry, which brings us to trust in divine power. Religious activity may actually improve health outcomes. One study showed that religiosity and spirituality has been shown to increase immune function. We know that stress increases our susceptibility to respiratory infections. This particular study showed that there was an increase in stress hormones, and it decreased our natural killer cell activity and also decreased a very important immunoglobulin or antibody in our system called IgA. And the number of respiratory infections tend to increase with increasing psychological stress. A lot of that going on right now. So again, we need to combat and try to offset some of these negative factors. Praying. It'll help us with worry, anxiety, and stress, because that often stands between us and real rest. So consider turning it over to God in prayer. Let God help us to deal with these stressful times. There's a very encouraging verse, actually 2 verses that I like in Philippians. It's Philippians 4, 6, and 7. It says, "Do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your request to God. And the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus." Wow, that is an encouraging set of verses there. Don't be anxious about anything, but in every situation, including COVID-19 pandemic, by prayer and petition and thanksgiving, we present our requests to God. And then what happens? The peace of God, and we certainly need peace right now, which transcends all understanding, we don't understand it all, will guard our hearts and our minds in Christ Jesus. What an encouraging promise. Trust in God brings us greater peace, less anxiety, and improved immune function. Being spiritually connected, studies have shown that those connected with God in faith and prayer, they tend to avoid illness, and if they do get sick, they tend to recover more quickly. Frequent prayer brings better health and emotional well-being and lower levels of psychological distress and increased longevity. This was an interesting look at hope. This is from an oncologist who wrote a book about the anatomy of hope, and he was talking about his oncology patients. He said, "Clear-eyed hope gives us the courage to confront our circumstances and the capacity to surmount them." And we certainly need to confront our circumstances, and we need to surmount them right now. He says, "For all my patients, hope, true hope, is proved as important as any medication." And I think we all need hope right now. This verse from Isaiah 41:10 says, do not fear, for I am with you. Wow, can't get any better than that, right? Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you and help you. I will uphold you with my victorious right hand. Incredible promise, and should encourage us in these difficult times. Hope. Hope gives birth to optimism, which is the natural antidepressant. And we have to accept the fact that bad things will happen. And they're certainly happening right now, right? So how you view these bad things can be key to shaping your outlook and improving your health. There was some research done on gratitude. And what they found is that those who regularly wrote down what they were grateful for had higher levels of optimism, alertness, enthusiasm, determination, attentiveness, and energy. They were more likely to help others, and certainly others need help right now. Exercise more regularly. They were more likely to make progress toward personal goals, have a better duration and quality of sleep, which we all need right now, and more likely to feel loved. So many people right now are frowning and being depressed about what's being held back from them, but we need to think about what we have, and we need to think about what we're grateful for, and not focus on the negative, but the positive. And that's going to help us get through this time. This is a great quote from that same book, Ministry of Healing. It says, "Nothing tends more to promote health of body and soul than does a spirit of gratitude and praise." Very encouraging. Nothing tends to promote health of body and of soul than does a spirit of gratitude and praise. We need to think long and hard about that during these difficult times. So remember that the mind and the body are intimately connected. So when we've got our mind rested and our mind connected with God and some of that anxiety reduced, our bodies are going to be healthier. So practice good health habits. Proper nutrition, including plenty of vegetables and fruits and beans and nuts and seeds and whole grains. That's the whole food plant-based diet that we encourage at Dinner with a Doctor. Exercise on a regular basis. Drink lots of water. Get adequate sunshine. Temperance. Avoid alcohol and smoking. Those are kind of obvious, right? But avoid cholesterol in animal-based products. Avoid saturated fat in high amounts. Avoid excessive sugar and salt, and I'd add oil to that list as well. Plenty of fresh air, adequate rest, and of course, trust in God. So this approach that we've been talking about into preventing illness, it's not alternative medicine. It's progressive medicine, and it's good medicine. And that's what we all need to be doing right now. Right now, it's not medications that are going to save us and cure us and prevent illness. It's putting our body into a healthy mode, one that's going to be resistant to various infections. So I'm going to close with a couple of verses that I find to be encouraging. This from John 16:33 says, "I have told you these things so that in me you may have peace." We certainly need peace. "In this world you will have trouble." And yes, we're having trouble right now. But it says, "But take heart, I have overcome the world." And speaking of fear, from 2 Timothy 1:7, "For God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind." Yes, we need to reflect on these promises right now. Some of these I think you should write down, put them on a yellow sticky and put them on your mirror so you can reflect and keep a hopeful attitude, because that's going to help us get through this along with everything else that we've talked about today. So I thank you for taking the time to listen to this presentation. We at Dinner with the Doctor encourage you to come to our website, dinnerwiththedoctor.com, for updates. Probably we'll have some additional videos in the future, maybe a Q&A in the very near future, so we can answer some of your questions. So we need to stay connected. Even though we can't meet person to person and like our usual, we can still get together and exchange information and share stories and things like that. So here are some reliable websites that I find to be helpful and evidence-based. And stay tuned to the Dinner with the Doctor website and for more information and updates. I would also encourage you to follow the recommendations of the CDC, of your federal government, of our local governments, and do what the officials are asking us to do, because I think we need to take this very seriously, and we will get through it. So again, thank you for your time. This has been Dr. Michael Hollie, with Dinner with a Doctor. Look forward to talking with you again soon.